first one of those is really about the economic impact of the pandemic, particularly on the economies outside of Africa, because we've all been in lockdown, and that's had catastrophic impacts on our economy. I mean, the UK figures this week saying a 20% drop in just 1 month. I mean, it's pretty damning. But how do you think that that's going to play out when it comes to the insurance markets in Africa? Are you worried about those economic impacts, and are you thinking that there's going to be a severe impact, or do you think that the insurance markets are in a strong enough position to ride this? Corneille, perhaps I can bring you in here on this one first, because I know you and I have been talking about some of this previously, so it'd be nice to, if you wouldn't mind, starting the conversation going.
We can only theorize on what will happen, because, as you know, economic statistics in our part of the world are not up to date, and we receive and we access them with a certain delay. But we can imagine what it is when the entire world and trade is suspended. So there are some publications in some countries. I think that the situation is very very difficult, and in terms of the contraction, the size of the contraction, for the moment, unfortunately, we rely on what has been published by the IMF, which is more relevant. So we have different scenarios, and depending on which countries. So we have 3 types of countries. We have the oil producers, and we have the low income countries, and we have South Africa alone, and North Africa. So I think the most hit for the moment is South Africa, which despite a huge stimulus, it's going to be in the range of 10% contraction. That is outlook for the year. I don't know exactly what it is for the month of May or April, but that's a projection for the entire year. And those projections are taking into account some scenarios of the recovery. But the recovery, as you know, no one knows the recovery, how it will be. If it will be a sharp recovery, or if it will be an anemic recovery going into 2021. So in any case, I think it is really the biggest shock which has happened to our countries in the recent history. Thank you very much.
I think the shock will also be in North Africa. Maybe to a country like Morocco, the crisis has conducted to partly a recession, but also in certain instances, the industry has been pretty quickly turned into producing masks, producing products that were answering to the pandemic situation. So yes, there will be a shock, definitely. I think, and the story is not finished. It's very difficult to plan how much it's going to be. But yeah, North Africa will be affected like everywhere in the world. And North Africa is heavily dependent on tourism, for instance, in Tunisia and Morocco. And that is the first, probably the instant shock. Nobody is visiting anymore these nice places in these 2 countries. And finally, you still have some of the North African countries where the curve of contamination is not at all controlled yet. And you have some of the North African countries where I would say the pandemic is just starting, unfortunately, and things are getting worse every day. Thinking about Egypt, for example. So yeah, the shock will be very high, and I think it's very difficult to quantify it, but definitely we are there.
Jeff, can I bring you in from East Africa? You know, are you obviously hospitality, tourism, very key to the East African markets? What's your view of how much of a shock, economic shock, it's going to be, and how that might impact the local insurance markets?
Yeah, thanks, Liz. In the East African market, I think we have seen that the focus for governments now is they've reallocated budgets in Kenya towards fighting the pandemic. We've seen that in Uganda, we've seen that in Kenya, we've seen that in Tanzania, and that budget reallocations have increased non-performing loans. Kenya, which is the biggest economy in East and Central Africa, we've seen an upsurge in non-performing loans. It also says that has got implications on in the economy. We have seen that the investment returns have been coming down. Obviously now, the Kenya insurance market for the past 4 years have been producing negative returns. The loss ratios have been increasing. So instead, we have seen a pressure on rates, but competition remains stiff. So in the long run, I think the impact from the international market, we have seen that reinsurance security ratings are coming under pressure, and I think there will be a shortage in capacity for retro that will push rates up. The shortage of capital will also affect some of our markets, because we rely very much on the retro. So yeah, that's what I see.
Lawrence, can I bring you in next on this one, and also, you know, just to ask how much of an impact COVID has actually had on the insurance markets in terms of claims? Are you seeing now, a couple of months down the line, are you beginning to see any COVID-related claims?
Thanks, Liz, and thanks, Udai and Vinita and Ryan for hosting this forum. In terms of the actual impact on our markets, it's not been primarily on the claim side. I think, as they are saying, I think this is really the first major event where you are seeing the impact on both sides of the balance sheet, the asset side and on the liability side. For us in Africa, what I am seeing, the immediate impact has been on the asset side. I think we saw a tanking in interest rates. We saw a collapse in the major capital markets like Nairobi, Lagos, record losses in terms of equity valuations. I think that's been, you know, those unrealized losses, that's been the greatest immediate impact on our operations as insurers and reinsurers. And in fact, there's significant pressure in certain markets on solvency for certain entities, and also regulators have had to come in and defer, in certain instances, recapitalization plans that had been put in place. Nigeria, for instance, and also Kenya, I think there's been a deferment of recapitalization measures. On the claims side, we have seen claims activity on the life business, but not significant. I think we haven't seen significant activity on the life side. There would be, we're not a major player there. I believe there would be a significant impact on those who do health and medical type insurance. What we have seen is also attempts, and primarily from certain markets where we are not that exposed, at litigation or threats of litigation for, what do you call it, business interruption claims, but nothing significant has come through. My view is the greatest impact now that we are going to see going forward is on revenues. I'll give an example. A market like Nigeria, we are anticipating a 50% drop in oil revenue for the country, and that's a devastating blow for a country like Nigeria. And I think this is the same blow that the impact is going to be the same for all oil producing and exporting countries. And in all those countries, oil is the fulcrum around which, that's really holding up the rest of the economy. So it impacts all other sectors, that kind of significant drop in oil revenues. And for a country like Nigeria, government is a major buyer of insurance. And what you are going to see, obviously, is reduced capacity by governments or other government-related entities in terms of, purchase of insurance. We are also seeing a fairly significant impact from COVID on cash flows. And I think all reinsurers around in this meeting will tell you that that there's no liquidity. Funds have basically dried up. We are not getting paid. And I believe as we get into the third quarter, it's going to get a lot worse. And I think it's primarily due to the fact that, certain key sectors have not been trading. Certain key sectors have been disrupted completely due to, the COVID scenario. Mining, as we mentioned, oil, we mentioned the hospitality sector, manufacturing sector. I was looking on the news today at a manufacturer from Zambia who's talking about, 80% of their inputs are imported, and value chains, and it's primarily from China, obviously, and value chains have been disrupted completely. So more and more what we are going to see going forward is really all those, related sectors, failing in terms of, their obligations to insurance companies. And I think insurance, as you would all appreciate, being in this market, a grudge purchase in the main, is probably the first item that's off the shopping list for most players. Or in terms of corporates, when there is a liquidity crunch, I think one of the items that they're going to defer payment on is insurance. So for me, those are the key issues that we are looking at, economic, liquidity, asset side, but on the claim side, fairly limited. Thank you, Liz.
If I could bring Joseph in. Joseph, in Ghana, I understand that the insurance market has been asking the regulator to delay capitalization plans there. And I'm wondering if that's been driven by some of these factors that Lawrence has been discussing, or whether that's just been a more practical thing that you don't have the capacity to sort it out at the moment.
Thank you very much, Liz. Indeed, it's true that the insurance community, the insurance companies, have requested of the regulator to delay the implementation of the new minimum capital requirements. And we look forward to a positive response from the regulator. This has come about because Ghana is not an exception to what is happening all over the world. Government has already revised down its projected GDP growth from 6.8% to 2.6%. And already government has also made available some amount of stimulus package to support small to medium scale enterprises. And just like where Lawrence left off, indeed, the insurance market is already had a hit. I can say that cedants in the country, in this market, are already losing between 30 to 40% of their initial budgeted incomes for the year. If you had a budget already approved before January, I'm saying that by the end of the quarter to this, from the end of last quarter to this second quarter, companies are revising their notes. Indeed, January for myself, I've had the board cause me to do a revised budget informed by the COVID impact on the company. And so I will say that I'm not surprised Kenya has taken after Nigeria's cue by postponing or delaying the implementation of the new capital requirement. Ghana has officially, the GIA has written to the National Insurance Commission, and I want to believe that they also follow the same course of action. So it's not any different, but it's rather we are all in the same direction and having the same effect.
Souvik, you've had your hand up for a little while. Can I bring you in now to make a comment?
Yeah, thank you very much, Liz. And just to supplement what Lawrence has already mentioned on your question about claims, we have seen a few instances where clients have been claiming for denial of access under business interruption without a corresponding physical damage. So now this is a bit of a wake-up call for us, and I see these claims coming in from Mauritius and from Egypt. So in an all risks policy, we have had instances where denial of access is an automatic inclusion. And I think going forward, we need to be very careful in examining how this works and how we safeguard against these going forward.
Yusuf, I see that you also would like to come in, so perhaps we can bring you in at this stage. And then I'd like to move the question on after that, if we could, please.
Thank you. So what I want to say for all the African reinsurer player, that it's very important to dedicate a committee in order to evaluate the impact for COVID. But you need to know exactly all the sleep, all the wording and the impact, because we will see the impact probably not for the 6 months, but later. And what happened for some market, I have some discussion with the CEO for insurer company here in Morocco, but I am sure it's the same case for other countries, that the direct broker, because you have a very strong impact for the direct broker, so the collection of the premium will be a serious problem. So the cash, okay, the insurer, the cedant, will not have the appropriate cash, and you have this disruption of the collection of premium. So this is the first point. So if you have some quota share, or if you have other treaty, you will be, of course, an impact. For the financial market, you know that a lot of countries don't have rules for Solvency II. So here in Morocco, you have an impact for the stock markets less than 20%. So we see we are now have some case, but of course we have an impact. Okay, so we consume all our value on this for the stock market, and for the claims, for the quota share claims, it's sure that it's we will have a very good and appropriate loss ratio comparing for the last year, okay? And for reinsurers who have this type of treaty, it's an opportunity. But it's sure that a fraud, okay, we can expect increase for the fraud, okay? And it's sure for the additional, okay, we will have some kind of suspect fraud. So we don't know if how we can deal with this situation, but we need to include in this for this figure. The other point is for the investment. The investment for it's sure that for the country who is more connected with oil and mining, we will have a serious impact. But here for the Maghreb, of course, the states want to launch a lot of projects to the states, but we need a time, okay, between the decision and after we will have a contact.
Udai, I know that you've been waiting to make a comment, so perhaps I can bring you in quickly and then we can turn on to some of the other issues. Udai.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you. Basically, the comment I want to make, which some of you may totally disagree with, but it's a thought that just popped in my head following the very valid comment made by Jeff on this event having pressure on security ratings of companies, and the comment made by Lawrence on how it's impacted the asset side of companies with share prices falling in various bourses in Africa. The comment I really want to make is, are we now looking at a major structural change in the markets in Africa, insurance markets in Africa, say in the horizon of the next 12 months through acquisitions and mergers? Is that what we are looking at? And is our client base now looking to change? Are we going to look at different client base altogether? That's my comment.
I don't know if anybody would like to come in and react to that. Corneille, do you foresee a time in when you might have more mergers and acquisitions? And I'm particularly interested in that whole rating agencies issue, because I think Fitch came out this week, didn't they, and said that they've downgraded, I think, 7 of the sovereigns, which obviously then ultimately will impact the insurance markets. So are you seeing this as an opportunity for wholesale change?
Thank you very much. So I think on the impact on the rating, yes, there will be some movement, especially for those companies who are already having some issues and some warnings. The example one has in mind is Swiss Re, which already had 3 years cumulative years of negative underwriting margin. What I was saying is that some companies were already showing some weaknesses in their underwriting portfolio, and if you add this year plus what one of us has mentioned about the impact on the asset side, so it's clear that they have been downgraded, and but I don't expect really a big impact on companies who were already good. One example is our case in this month of May. Our rating with Standard & Poor's has been maintained, as they found that the impact of COVID will not really, our claims experience will not worsen. So it will depend case by case, and I think European and London-based companies, which were already having a very difficult for 3 years in terms of performance, are to be worried, and let's say maybe 40% of companies will be downgraded towards the end of the year, and some have started to prevent it by raising capital on the stock market. So that is what I see. I don't see it in Africa in a bigger way. As you know, Africa will not be impacted similarly to Europe, except South Africa, which will have a hit of maybe 6% contraction, Nigeria 3% contraction, but companies were generally strong on the capital side. So for this year, I think we can maintain our ratings. Those who are rated by AM Best, I think AM Best says that the outlook is stable. They don't see a big impact on the continent of Africa on the claim side. So top line is something which is really a puzzle. We don't know exactly what will be the end of this year in top line, plus the liquidity side.
I think I just wanted to comment regards, the question raised by Udai there in terms of structural changes in the market. My view really is that we are already seeing significant pressure and that's on the primary insurance side. In all instances, in all the major markets where regulators have called for recapitalizations, companies, particularly the smaller ones, they've all been struggling to meet up with the new minimum capital requirements. My view is the days of fragmented markets are gone. The primary driver and the attraction of capital in the insurance in Africa has been the very attractive, technical margins. The business has been generally profitable on the underwriting side. That has gradually come off. Over the last 5-6 years, we have seen significant reduction in margins on the technical side. And most of our markets, most of the smaller companies have been subsisting on investment returns. And for you to get decent investment returns, one, you must have the liquidity. And number two, you must have capital markets that are flourishing, and you must have high interest rates. All those factors are gone. And my view is we will either see failures going forward, particularly the smaller players, or we must see, I think, significant consolidations. And we do have certain groups on the continent that have the appetite to acquire the smaller players. My view is we are moving in a direction where conditions are such that smaller players cannot survive. Even in this COVID environment, we've got small players who didn't even have a digital strategy. They didn't have the capacity or capabilities to work remotely. It just tells you the extent to which they are, weak. My view is these small players will struggle going forward, particularly on the primary insurance side. Thank you.
My comment is really on what Udai said. I think reinsurance is derived demand. And obviously, if the pandemic continues and there's no slowdown in terms of the economy is coming back to normal, I see that there could be consolidations in the markets. Why? Because in most of our key markets, the double down markets, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Zambia, a lot of the projects which were done by the Chinese are currently put on hold, and that's a loss of income. We also see that the regulators in Kenya, in Uganda, have pushed for premium holidays. we are not talking about current premiums, but we are talking about long outstanding premiums. And obviously that is going to put pressure on insurance companies' liquidity. So if this continues for the next 6 months, I see some of the weaker companies looking for capital elsewhere, and the only way to sustain themselves is to bring in new partners. The hotel and tourism sector, we've seen a significant decline in revenues. Most of the hotels in Nairobi have been closed. I'm sure you've seen that. You can talk of the Crown Plaza, it has been closed for the past 3 months. People have been staying on leave without pay. Obviously, that has put pressure on the life and the medical business, and we've already seen a decline in revenues in those sectors. So, motor is the biggest class. We have seen a number of our clients moving from comprehensive insurance to fire, trade, department theft. So it's putting a dent on those revenues, meaning that really companies might find themselves in solving problems. Thank you.
But whilst everybody thinks about that and perhaps comes up with some comments on that, Clement, can I bring you in? And obviously Ghana's been in a slightly different position because you have come out of lockdown quite quickly. So perhaps you don't have the same issues that some of the other countries are suffering with. Would you like to come in and make some comments, and then maybe we can come back to exactly what Vinita was talking about?
Well, I think we do have the same challenges, even though we had our lockdown lifted earlier on. We do have the same challenges just like other countries are having. I think in times like this, one would presume that there are the theory of advantages in disadvantages comes the fall. I mean, what could one make out of all these in terms of the challenges? I would want to focus on the equity side. Like Joseph said, regulators are being talked to so as to see how best they can sort of extend the capital increase position. But then private equity companies, I think around this time, will want to observe for a while and then see the performance before they advise their clients as to whether they should invest in some of the companies or not. So in that regard, I see more of mergers coming into play rather than acquisitions, because of course there wouldn't be much of excess funds. One other issue that I would want to also inquire is with the coming effect of IFRS 17, how is this pandemic going to impact the IFRS 17 in relation to insurance contracts?
The situation in Southern Africa would best be described as different from one country to another. You will find in terms of the impact of COVID-19, South Africa is by far the highest statistics, both in terms of infections as well as deaths. In terms of the economic impact, again, it varies from one country to another. So I will probably zero in on the experience from Zimbabwe, where I'm closer to, and I'll probably be able to just comment in terms of both government reaction, the impact on the economy, and also the extended impact on the insurance sector. First, the issue of lockdowns. Again, we saw this across the rest of the Southern African continent, and the attempt by the government to raise funding for COVID-19, especially the purchase of PPEs from the private sector through government bonds. Again, the impact of the financial markets. Basically, it has been a mopping of the liquidity from the financial markets. We have seen also the issue to do with additional budgets coming up, fund the activities around COVID-19. And basically what that has done also is to strain the fiscus, especially when you look at the taxation for most of these economies, Zimbabwe in particular. So when you look at the actual impact on the insurance industry in Zimbabwe, we have got a COVID bond that came from it, and the sanctions thereon basically meant much reduced liquidity in it. And at the same time, you have heard from other markets, which is the same experience here in Zimbabwe, regarding slowed movement of premium. So credit control has been a significant challenge. But again, we've got other macroeconomic challenges, which basically have had their own impact on the performance of the economy. So if you put together with the impact of COVID, you then get business, the industry at large, that's the manufacturing industry, that is basically struggling in its own core businesses. That impact then again reflects on the performance of the insurance sector in terms of the take-up of insurance and basically the remittances, as I mentioned earlier on. But again, when you look at lockdowns, you then have got other challenges. People movement is changed, and basically with constrained people movement, services to the business. You talk of your risk surveys, loss assessments, and the like. It means they slow down in terms of the reports that you will get because the assessments cannot be done on time. So the coming in of claims as well. In a lockdown, you definitely have then a time lag where you don't get the reports on time, where you get the claims reported included on time. But again, overall, when you eventually look at the claims that are advised to you, which are not concluded, you then realize that you probably have a lot that is going into your reserves. So it's the paid element that is small, but the reserved element is growing big on your claims. So basically, this has been the kind of experience that we have had. COVID-linked claims, where we can say the short-term side, claims with a cause being COVID-19. We have not yet those in Zimbabwe. I can't comment about other Southern African countries. I'm sure Jeff or Lawrence here on will be able to comment on that. But in Zimbabwe, we haven't had any COVID-related claims on the short-term side. We are still taking these as early days. In terms of forecasting, we think that the capacity that has been discussed earlier on is pretty much because of the weakening currencies and also the challenges that we have with the ability of other instruments that tend to augment the traditional capacity in our markets. So capacity is constrained, and overall, the business is slow at this moment. Thank you.
Concernant, bon, je voulais parler de façon générale sur l'activité de la zone ciment particulièrement. Nous avons fait une analyse globale avec qu'on appelle notre autorité ciment sur l'impact de Covid dans la zone. Réellement, il est difficile aujourd'hui de donner un impact quantitatif sur l'activité de la zone. Cependant, nous avons remarqué que quelques effets sur les décès au niveau de la vie, qui posent quelques problèmes. Il y a eu quelques réclamations. Ensuite, concernant l'impact sur le bilan qu'on appelle des sociétés d'assurance ou de réassurance, ça c'est tout à fait clair compte tenu du fait que les activités sont au ralenti à cause de, on ne dit pas ici le confinement, mais nous avons eu le couvre-feu, nous avons les mesures barrières qui ont entraîné certaines compagnies à prendre des mesures de réduire l'effectif dans les compagnies et qui jouent effectivement sur les encaissements des compagnies. Et nous-mêmes, nous avons constaté même des difficultés de transfert, des difficultés de virement de fonds à partir de nos banques extérieures. Donc, qui dit difficulté de virement, ça veut dire que même la réception est encore difficile. parce que les banques sont devenues de plus en plus délicates, parce que les banques demandent beaucoup de justificatifs au niveau des virements reçus ou bien des virements effectués, compte tenu de la situation des pays sanctions sur sanctions. Donc tout ça, ça impacte relativement les activités de la CICA particulièrement. Et ça, je suis convaincu que c'est beaucoup de compagnies aussi qui sont dans la zone. Bon, parallèlement, nous avons quelques cas où on nous parlait des pertes d'exploitation au niveau de, qu'on appelle des réclamations au niveau de la perte d'exploitation de certaines entreprises. Dans la zone ciment, heureusement, nous n'avons pas de pertes d'exploitation qu'on appelle isolement donné. Les pertes d'exploitation sont données conjointement avec les risques dommages. Donc, il est difficile aujourd'hui que le Covid puisse avoir un impact sur les réclamations des pertes d'exploitation dans nos zones. Au-delà de ça, nous savons bien que forcément, compte tenu du ralentissement des activités, il y aura un impact vraiment sur qu'on appelle les bilans des compagnies d'assurance et de réassurance de la zone. Mais cela ne peut pas être quantifié aujourd'hui. Après le premier semestre, peut-être qu'avec les évaluations, nous pourrons peut-être avoir une bonne idée de la quantification de ces éléments. Je vous remercie.